Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Sidcast. And in today's episode, I'm doing it a little differently because I'm decided to do a live session on Facebook just to sort of test out to see if I could do something a little differently with the Sidcast videocast. And I'm going to just see how it goes. And maybe going forward, I'll probably do something like this every Sunday where I do a live session instead of a recorded video, which I later upload on my YouTube channel. So, in today's episode, what I want to really speak about is a concept that I've sort of become very familiar with, and it's a concept I've been trying to apply in my daily way of living in terms of, my work, in terms of my business fields or anything that I'm doing relating to businesses, and also just generally how I approach any particular situation in my life. So, basically, that concept is learning to fail forward. Now, basically, what the concept really is about is if you think about the subject of failure, failure is something which in a lot of societies is obviously very taboo, or I wouldn't say taboo, it's more a subject which can be very controversial in the sense that a lot of people obviously don't like failure. And in some societies, failure is something that's not really seen very highly. So, what tends to happen is a lot of people obviously put pressure on themselves in terms of achieving certain goals or putting certain standards when it comes to how they approach their life. And one of the things, obviously, is they don't want to fail in life. Now, for me, as a person growing up, particularly from my background that I came from, failure was something which obviously was something that a lot of people didn't want to obviously have in their lives. And particularly in my situation, failing was almost like not an option. So, I grew up with this mentality that failure was something that was not really good because what it meant was that you as a person obviously were not developing because of those failures. And over the course of time, obviously through my dealings with my work environments or my situations where it came to maybe a particular business I was working on, or just something that I felt I was striving to achieve a particular goal or objective, failure was something that I always didn't want to have. And the thing is, we grow up with this mentality where failure for us is something that we see doesn't actually help us in terms of our progress as a person, whether it's yourself growing as a person in terms of your personality or just growing as a person in terms of how you develop your different skill sets. So the way I saw failure was that whenever I did something and I didn't achieve something, then for me that was failure because I was, hey Karen, good to see you here. Hey Dan, good to see you here as well. And you see, failure for me was something that I felt I didn't want to always see because I just felt it was just going to hamper me in terms of my progress. And this is something that a lot of people tend to see in terms of failure because has been something that is drilled into our heads, maybe by our parents, by our teachers, or even just any sort of person that we saw as a mentor, where failure was not something we wanted to have as an objective in our lives. And what we don't realize is that failure is just a perception. So it's what's in our mind or our mindset. So basically, what I've started seeing is, failure actually is, how we perceive a particular outcome or a situation in terms of achieving a goal or an objective. And if you perceive something as not really being a failure, but something you've learned from, then actually it's going to help you in terms of your progress as a person, whether it's achieving that specific goal or objective. So, what I really want to say is that when it comes to striving for something particular, whether it's you building a business online or offline, or whether it's you, achieving something, maybe you're trying to, gain a particular sort of physique in terms of your health, or you're trying to complete a specific project at work, which is very important to you in terms of your career or your objectives in terms of developing your career. Don't think about failure because failure per se is actually something that is more of a perception. So, what you actually need to start seeing is how exactly are you growing as a person, in that particular situation. And even if, say, you didn't achieve a specific objective in terms of that thing you're striving for, what you need to actually realize is that you're actually growing as a person. You're not actually failing because you're actually developing different skill sets. You're developing different adaptability scenarios where you can adapt as a person. So you're not actually failing as a person. Now, the other people around you might see something as a failure because for them, they're perceiving it as failure. What's important is, do you perceive it as failure in that particular situation? So that is why I've called this particular episode Failing Forward, because actually what you're doing is you are perceived as failing in terms of what society thinks is a failure, but actually as a person, you're progressing forward in terms of what you're looking to achieve and strive for. So the next time you see a particular situation where you feel like, I might actually fail, or you start thinking you might actually fail in that, rather look at the situation where you see how exactly are you going to grow as a person and how are you going to develop as a person from that particular situation. And obviously see what is your benefit from going through that situation, even if you perceive you might actually fail from that situation, so that you can see how you're always progressing forward and how you can actually use your skills going forward in another different situation. So that what happens in that situation is when people actually see, and as Karen says, also take the lesson, that's very important. What you can see is perhaps you'll actually start influencing other people because they see that, despite you going through all these obstacles and all these barriers in terms of that specific objective you're striving for, they will see you've actually come out of it a better person. And actually they'll find that there's been a lot of situations in their lives where they didn't actually, obviously strive forward because they got worried about failure. So that's why it's important to always take the lesson that you've learned from that particular situation and see how you can actually apply it to a different area of your life. And from that, you'll actually realize that as time goes by, you'll actually find that failure was always just a perception in your mind. It was a mindset aspect, and hence you're able to move forward or strive forward, or as I like to call, fail forward, so that you're actually growing as a person. So I just want to thank the guys that have come on this live session of the Sidcast. Thanks to Karen for being here. Thanks for Dan also for being here. Nice to see you here early in the morning. And I see Anu also just joined. Hopefully you enjoyed that session. And I'll probably do more of these live sessions in terms of Sidcast. And if you missed this session, I will put the recording of it in my YouTube channel and I'll release it on my social media. So I hope you do catch it as well. And great to see you. I'll see you in another episode. Take care. Take care, guys.